And of you, how many are actually using our new account system? You know, 1Password, families, teams, individuals versus just the local clients. Okay, 0. Anyway, so I'm going to be talking about what you're not yet using. And this should go into view, single page. In a sense, I'm continuing on my previous 2 PasswordsCon talks. A year ago, I spoke about what we're now calling 2-secret key derivation. And I will try to very briefly review that without going into the details of the actual key derivation. While a year ago, it was all about the key derivation. But as you'll see, it means that the user has a master password, and the user has a secret that is stored more or less unencrypted on their own devices. And these two get fed into the local key derivation process. In Las Vegas, I talked about how we present this 2-secret key derivation. It's a very new thing for users. People don't know what to make of it. And it was sort of a discussion of, are we doing a good enough job of setting people up so that they treat these other things correctly? And as you'll see, this actually leads into what I'm talking about today, which is how we do recovery within something that is genuinely end-to-end encryption. Okay, so these are actually me cribbing my slides from last year. We make a password manager, and until about a year ago, we never held on to any data. Now we do. I'm going to just informally say what I mean by account recovery here. So if somebody has a 1Password account, they will be a member of a team or a family. And I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to use the language and terminology that we use for 1Password teams. Morgan is a member of a team, and through her knowledge of her master password and her access to her account key on her local device, she has the capacity to do various things with her data. Let's just say decrypt her data that she can fetch from the server. Morgan forgets her master password or either loses the account key. You know, the only copy of it gets trashed through a disk crash or something like that. And then recovery is a thing. And after that, she is restored to state 1. So that's what I mean by account recovery in this case. And then, of course, a lot of stuff goes in that account recovery thing, and that's what I'll be hitting on the second part of this. As we just heard, and I think we're all familiar with, is that password reset procedures, the authentication of them is inherently weaker than the actual authentication system in general. These can often be reset by help desks who are subject to social engineering or any other kinds of tricks like that. And in a sense, if you've got the capacity to do such a reset, then you don't really have end-to-end encryption. So recovery mechanisms are very scary. And my watch is making way too much noise. So from a purely security point of view, if you ignore data availability, I'd rather simply not have a recovery mechanism at all, and just I want to make it clear from the beginning before I work through how this whole thing works, is that we do have truly end-to-end encryption, and the way that we have recovery is that we delegate the capacity to perform recovery to the owners or managers of the teams or families that get set up. And I'm going to collapse a whole bunch of different roles because teams can have a complex sets of roles. So I'm just going to talk about the owner of a team or the organizer of a family, and they are the ones who have the capacity to perform recovery for members of that family, members of that team, but we do not have that capacity. Okay, and the usual reasons for wanting a recovery system is that the kinds of data that you store in something like a password manager and general documents stored, you secure document store and all the things that you can do in 1Password and similar, it's catastrophic if you lose that, or it certainly can be. Data, as another conversation I had here a couple days ago was that, without data availability, confidentiality and integrity doesn't mean anything. You need to actually be able to do stuff with your data. And the other thing, of course, is that we couldn't actually sell anything to businesses if we didn't offer some kind of recovery mechanism. We have an unusual, and I have to be careful not to unplug things. We have an unusual extra need for recovery, which is really that we have an extra way that people can lose their access. That is, they need both their master password and this account key thing to be able to derive the keys that are necessary to decrypt and authenticate to our system. And therefore, they've got new ways to get completely frozen out of their data. And I want to give a little background. Some of this is just a repeat of what I talked about last year, but without going into the technical details of how the key derivation works. But the rationale for why did we cause ourselves all this trouble with this two-secret key derivation and this other thing that people lose is it's a usability issue, it's a data availability issue. And so just a little bit about authentication to a service. With a traditional username password site authentication, every time you log in, you're actually sending your credential, your password to the server, which then gets processed, so you're actually transmitting your authentication secret. You've got other problems. It doesn't authenticate the server to the client, and the whole thing's replayable, and there are lots of other attacks that can be done on a typical on just your typical login stuff, which I assume most people are familiar with. A solution to almost all of the problems are password authenticated key exchange mechanisms. The one that we use is called SRP, Secure Remote Password, and I'm not going to describe how those work. You actually can just sleep during this because I'll get to the main point afterwards. But during registration, the client will calculate something, and so it will calculate. And here I'm talking about SRP. It will calculate something that's been creatively called X. So the SRP X, and this is a client secret that the client has or can derive from local password key derivation stuff. And from the X, the client computes a V, a verifier. And this verifier is what gets sent to the server on first registration. And because we're going to have clients logging in or connecting from different places, we can't store the salt purely locally. The salt has to go to the server so it can pass that down to new clients trying to connect. Okay, now during the actual authentication, it's really nice. The client derives its X from its various secrets. The client and server do a little bit of Diffie-Hellman-like exchange and dance and stuff like this. And because of the mathematical relationship between the server's verifier and X, the client proves to the server that it knows X without sending any secrets and without sending anything replayable. The server proves to the client that it knows the verifier V, so you get mutual authentication. This whole thing is done in a non-replayable way. And a session key is also generated, so you encrypt the rest of the session with something derived during this authentication process so that you can have much more secure transport, another layer of transport security. The main thing is that a PAKE does a lot of really wonderful things that solve an enormous problem with just login security. But that verifier is attackable in the same way that a password hash is attackable. It's not a password hash, but if an attacker gets that verifier and the salt and knows the algorithms, which of course are actually specified out in our white paper, then the attacker can run password guesses, go through our whole local key derivation process, see if generate an X, generate the V from the X, see if it's the same, and if they've made the right guess, then they'll get the same V. So it can be used in the same way that a hash could be used in terms of cracking. So the V is no worse than what we have, than what we have, but it's no better either. And of course, in our key derivation process, we use a ton of PBKDF2 and all of those sorts of things that you're supposed to do. But this again isn't really enough. We have to perform all of that key derivation, that's all performed by the user's client. And so we're computationally bound by whatever the user has in their pockets. And in terms of algorithms and systems, we're bound by having to actually have this work on all of our client platforms. So we're still stuck with PBKDF2, even though there are better successors. And we do, what is it? I think at the moment it's 100,000 rounds with HMAC SHA-256. So, it's not bad. Okay. I'm going to talk about things like a 50-bit password, or a password with 50 bits of strength. And here I'm actually quoting from my first PasswordsCon talk. Don't need to actually know this because I also haven't given you the definition of gamma. But the general idea is you take the average number of guesses given a distribution of passwords to find a particular password with a 50% probability. So you've got basically, it's like guessing entropy. You're counting up how many guesses it takes to have a good chance of guessing a password, and then you're just taking the base 2 logarithm of that count to get it all nicely in bits so you can compare it with the other things that we do. So that's what I mean when I talk about the strength of a password in what follows. Now, okay, look, he's American, so I don't have to give a French pronunciation. Bonau and Schachter did a nice little preliminary thing at the beginning of a paper where they actually made estimates of cost to crack by looking at the total results of Bitcoin mining in 2013. And these are extremely rough, broad estimates, necessarily. But they came up with a figure of about $1 million for 2 to the 70 cryptographic operations. If a slow hash, if something like our PBKDF2, or just guessing a password, is more computationally expensive than performing a single hash operation or testing a particular AES key or something like that, if testing a password is 1 million times slower than testing a single hash or testing a single AES key or something like that, because you're also generating your guesses and all of that computation, then that adds an effective 20 bits. And if we just take Moore's law from their 2013 estimate, we'd say that computation is 4 times cheaper today. So what this means is that a well-hashed password, something with good, strong, use of Argon, bcrypt, whatever, needs a strength of more than 52 bits to kind of be at the edge of $1 million attack. So we're adding the 20 bits of effective strength through the slow hashing, gets us 72, but we've taken off 2 bits for the difference between now and 2013. Okay, so at another PasswordsCon talk, I talked about our word list, our Diceware-like system, and the words that we've developed. It's approximately 18,400 words. Word list, so a passphrase from that word list that has just 3 words in it is approximately 42 bits. One that's 4 words is approximately 56 bits. And one that's 5 words is approximately 70 bits. And then using these estimates, the cost of cracking those is about $1,000 for the 3-word one, tens of millions for the 4-word one, and astronomical for 5 words. Now, in our user interface, when people sign up, we default to showing them, for generating for them 4-word passwords. But we suspect that most people either choose their own passwords or go down to 3 words instead of 4 words. And so we don't have data on this. Obviously, we don't know how strong our customers' master passwords are. because if we could have that information, that would actually be a bad thing. Or the capacity to gain that information would be a bad thing. But it's safe to assume that a substantial portion of our customers will have master passwords that are under 42 bits and therefore crackable on the order of $1,000. So you've got your service, and we're worried about, of course, insider attacks. We're worried about your traditional hacking attack, and of course, there are attacks via subpoena or legal structure. And normally I just list those three and don't say anything, but us hackers, we talk about these really bizarre hypothetical situations. Things that, just abstract worst case things like, as a hypothetical, if like a thin-skinned, erratic narcissist with no sense of civil liberties were to just somehow come to control the world's most powerful surveillance apparatus, you may be a little bit concerned about whether you are storing on your servers stuff that would be valuable to such an entity. So we're basically cowards, and we don't want to store such information. So this is why we introduced the two-secret key derivation that I talked about last year, where you've got a high entropy user secret that is stored on their machines, and that means that data captured from us is, that the verifiers that we store, that the verifiers and the salts that we store are insufficient to launch a plausible password cracking attack. The attacker would also need to get this thing that we call an account key from the user system. So that's why we introduced the account key. But as I said, and to actually get back to where we're going, the account key increases the possibility of people getting themselves locked out. So that compelled us to really have to have some kind of recovery system. And to explain how our recovery system works, I need to describe a lot of the internal keys and structures used within 1Password for teams, families. So when a person creates their account, their client generates a public-private key pair. We call this the personal key set. And the private part, the secret part of that key is encrypted with something that's derived from their account keys and master password. So we've got these personal key sets, those public-private key pairs. Data is stored in vaults in our terminology. So particular items. For 1Password item, you will have a vault with multiple items. Again, just very briefly, all of our controls are in terms of vaults, and every item within a vault is encrypted with that vault's vault key, which is a symmetric key. And so when you create a vault, you also generate the symmetric key for that vault. And when you add someone to that vault, when you share the vault with them, you encrypt the vault key with the recipient's public key. Okay. Now, then there's something that is entirely, or that is largely invisible to users. These are groups, and a group also has something like a personal key set, but it's not a person, it's a group, so we need another name for it, but we don't talk about it that much, so we don't actually have a name for it. Let me call it the group key set. But a group behaves, but things will be encrypted with the group's public key. And then the people who are able to decrypt the secret key for the vault are the members of that vault. So they can decrypt, so the secret key for a vault is encrypted with Bob's public key. Bob can decrypt that, get the secret key for the vault, and then get anything that is encrypted with the vault's public key. Man, I hate this stuff. Okay, I hope that was all perfectly clear. Okay, but all of that about groups was to introduce the notion of a special group called the recovery group. It is created when a team family is created, so the owner, organizer of the team gets the private key for the recovery group. The owner can add people to the recovery group by, again, it's sending the private key, sending the secret key to the recovery group and encrypting that with a public key of whoever they're adding to it. But unlike other groups, the server does not deliver the encrypted vault keys held by the group except under special circumstances. So those things are not sent to the client normally. Okay. So at the beginning of the process, Bob is the team owner. I know this is Bob and Carol. I originally had a more complicated layout. Bob is the owner. The secret key sub R is the secret key belonging to the recovery group, and that gets encrypted with Bob's public key. So Bob has that. Carol joins. So she generates a vault key, and she also generates other, personal key set. And of course, people will have multiple vaults, but Caesar just uses one. She generates vault key. She encrypts her items with that vault key. That's actually that's a process that's spelled out elsewhere. I'm just doing that as one line here. And she sends to the server her encrypted data, but she is also sending to the server her vault key encrypted with the public key of the recovery group. And see, Bob has the ability to, right, okay. Let me just continue. And now it gets worse. Okay, so Carol has informed Bob through some other mechanism that she has forgotten her master password, lost her account key, needs account recovery, and so Bob authenticates to the system and clicks a start recovery for Carol thing, which sends instructions to Carol to her email. So email is very much part of the recovery process. What these instructions, and it also changes the state of Carol's account on the system, basically have Carol go through a repeat of the initial sign-on procedure. It looks a little different. There are fewer things she has to do, but she gets a new account key. Again, that's generated by the client. She picks a new master password, and but she is generating a new public key set. And so a new personal key set. She's sending her public key, her new public key to the server. When the server receives her new public key, when she's completed that process, it sends a notice to Bob saying, okay, now you can go through the complete recovery step. And when Bob clicks on that complete recovery, then the server will send the vault keys, Carol's vault keys encrypted with the recovery, that were encrypted with the recovery keys, public key. Oh man, this stuff is really, is this actually useful for anybody, or should I just say it works?
You have 60 minutes, Jack.
Okay. So Bob's client now, and only now, that is after Carol went through her process and her steps, only now get the keys to her vault that are encrypted to the recovery group's public key. And since Bob has the secret key for the recovery group, he can decrypt that, get Carol's old vault key, and then he re-encrypts it with Carol's new public key and sends to the server Carol's old vault key, now re-encrypted with Carol's new public key, and the server will send that and that vault data to Carol, who can now decrypt her vault key, the old vault key, using her new public key, and can then use that to actually decrypt the vault or the items in the vault and get her data. So there are a couple things to note about this. And these are things that are enforced by the server. So, not fully cryptographically enforced, which would be better, but it's what we had to do. So a member of the recovery group will not be granted to the encrypted data in a vault that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. So if Carol has a vault, let's call it her personal vault, that Bob should not normally have access to, while during this process, his client does get that vault key. He's not actually given the data for that vault. So the server won't transmit to him the data in that vault. A member of the recovery group will only be sent the encrypted vault keys after the user requesting recovery has recreated their account. That is, so Carol has to get the notification to here's your next step in what to do for recovery. And so she gets that notification, she has to act on it and regenerate her stuff, and only then will the server send Bob the vault key that's encrypted with the group public key. If the user successfully authenticates prior to completion of this recovery, the whole recovery thing is canceled and the server won't send Bob anything. So that is if Carol thought that she forgot her master password, requested recovery, or of course if somebody fake requested recovery, once she actually successfully logs in before any complete recovery thing, we know that she doesn't actually need the recovery. Okay, so the biggest and most obvious attack on this is that, Chaina is my kind of problematic dog. Very, very sweet under the right circumstances. And Morgan is just a very sweet dog. Anyway, if Chaina is a member of the recovery group for a team with Morgan as a member, then if Chaina can intercept and tamper with Morgan's email, then, okay, sorry, these slides, forget my spelling. I can't spell. Then Chaina has the power to take over Morgan's account. So if the notification, if the email of here are the steps to do to Carol or to Morgan are intercepted by Chaina and not actually delivered to Morgan, then Chaina can go and recreate Morgan's account with her own account key, master password, and then we'll be able to do a complete takeover. But again, this is a capacity that is limited to the particular team or organization. So it's a power that let's say Widgets Co. uses 1Password for Teams, they set things up, their account owner or various administrators have this capacity to take over individual accounts within it. Okay, so we have some general advice for organizations that do this. Members of the recovery group should be adept at keeping the devices that they use secure and free of malware. They should be aware of social engineering trickery. We encourage them to verify requests for recovery through something other than email, to use some other channel of communication as appropriate for their organization. We don't know their organization. Oh, right, that was my next point. Okay. You should be aware of email attacks. And if the last member of a recovery group gets run over by a bus, that's it. No one else can be added to the recovery group because nobody has the secret key for the recovery group. And then you just have to make sure that people don't forget their master passwords or lose their account keys. Okay, and so I'll actually finish where in Las Vegas, I just kind of presented what this process looked like to the user. I can play the 5-minute video of that and have 1 minute for questions, or I could skip that video and have 6 minutes for questions.
Who has questions?
Okay, 2 questions. I'm going with a video. Okay, so that's Chaina. When you see her picture, this is what she's doing. So she's received a request out of band from Morgan to recover. She does a begin recovery. And so all this is doing is setting the server in a particular state to watch logins and sends and informs Morgan what she needs to do. Morgan then goes through something that's like our initial thing. She gets assigned an account key. This is also stored by the browser if she's using the web client. And you have to see the talk from the summer to understand what we do to make sure people don't lose account keys. She picks a master password, and now, so at this point, she's created a new personal key set, and her new public key has been sent to the server. And so now we're back to Chaina, who gets notified to complete the recovery. Chaina logs in again and simply presses a complete recovery button, but that is where she is getting Morgan's old vault keys, decrypting with the recovery group key, and then re-encrypting. And now Morgan can sign in again, and her precious data that she created earlier in a different set of videos that were used in that talk. Sorry. This is one of the ways we encourage people to not lose their account keys, is we actually encourage people print this thing out. This is, again, it's all generated client side. And there we go. She has her precious data back again. And that's just about something else anyway. Okay, so questions?